The days of Africa remaining a toothless tiger is over. Now the second largest continent has started growling. While the conflict between Russia and Ukraine rages on, Africa has begun to change and the West is set to experience some horrible nightmares as a result. Remember how the continent, despite being the most underdeveloped region, has been forced to follow the EU's diktats of climate change. But now, with just one warning, Africa has compelled Brussels to bend on its knees. Hi and welcome to TFI Global, the foreign affairs and geopolitical analysis arm of the TFI Media Group. I'm your host Atul Mishra, and if you haven't subscribed to the TFI Global channel yet, hit the subscribe button and press the bell icon to receive all the latest updates. And please install our Apple and Android mobile applications. The link is given below in the description. Let's begin. Last year at the COP26 summit, more than 54 African nations proposed 1.3 trillion per year from developed countries to compensate for the climate change they have impinged upon the globe. The African leaders asserted that between 2025 and 2030, developed countries need to provide at least $1.3 trillion a year to Africa and other countries in the name of climate change, split evenly between climate mitigation and adaptation. This call of Africa was immediately backed by India, but Western dignitaries refrained from having a formal debate on the subject. The delegation complained about some parts of this proposal and resisted the discussion of it. More than 10 months have passed since the idea was unveiled in front of the world. Africa's attitude has undergone a complete transformation. Now, European leaders are avoiding talking about green energy with African leaders. According to Politico, European leaders are skipping meetings with African leaders. 7 African presidents will be in Rotterdam on September 5th to attend the climate summit, but from Europe, only Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte will show up. Leaders from nations including France, Denmark, Finland, and Norway, who have historically made contributions to climate adaptation, were invited according to the summit's organizers, the Global Center on Adaptation, or the GCA. But guess what? None of them will arrive in person. The summit is viewed as the first significant test of the developed world's resolve to double its financial support for climate-proofing projects in poorer nations to around $40 billion per year by 2025, as stated at the most recent United Nations Climate Summit in Glasgow. The current move should be seen as a major victory of Africa's arm-twisting tactics that have made Europeans completely surrender. For years, the EU has constantly manipulated Africa in the name of climate change. The extremely resource-rich African soil has been severely exploited by Europeans. This approach was the root cause of Africa's underdevelopment for years. Hence, Africa is doing a face-lifting act, seeking $1.3 trillion from the big guns in Europe. Africa is home to 17% of the world's population, yet it only accounts for 2 to 3% of the emissions which contribute to climate change. However, the EU has reprimanded Africa, highlighting the continent's fragility as a result of its slow socio-economic growth. However, emissions from the rest of the globe, especially the West, are relatively significant. Emissions are 13% in the European Union and 19% in the US respectively, yet they don't want to follow their own climate goals. So now Africa has made a concrete statement about climate change. Either the West needs to compensate or it will actively start exploiting its resource-rich motherland. Recently, the government in Congo announced that the nation will be auctioning its rainforests and basins to oil companies for drilling, as its priority is not to save the planet. Furthermore, several African nations have approached India for selling its lithium. Yes, you heard that right. Several African nations have approached India with offers to service a portion of their development loans in exchange for access to their mining activities and permission to export highly demanded lithium and cobalt. The current beating from Africa gives a clear picture of how EU's dictatorial green agenda has failed, and that too terribly. There are increasing calls in Africa to continue exploiting fossil fuel reserves, as Europe has done for the last 150 years. $1.3 trillion is a huge amount. Furthermore, the EU's coffers are already running dry as the Ukraine war has soaked all of its money. Hence, there is no stopping Africa at this moment.